have a strong start here to our first half. Time to welcome up our second storyteller,
Frank D'Amato.
Frank D'Amato, ladies and gentlemen.
My father was addicted to gambling and rage. It was a lively combination. I might do something really horrible like leave my shoelaces untied or forget my jacket. If my father were losing, he'd freak out. "What in Christ's name is wrong with you, you stupid little cocksucker?" It's really weird being called a cocksucker by your own father. Surprisingly, I developed some emotional problems. Yeah. By the time I was 7 years old, I had the self-esteem of a disabled crackhead. I was traumatized. I was really terrified. I felt like an alien. So to cope with that, I received into my own little fantasy world. So fast forward some. I'm 12 years old, a very delicate social age, and I'm at church in the back pew, and I'm really bored with the Mass. So I'm pacing back and forth, and I'm lost in one of my fantasies, right? In which I am really charming and dashing, and all the girls like me, so I'm really into this fantasy, right? And suddenly, I have the feeling like I'm being watched, right? And I snap out of it, right? And I go, oh my, I realize that I was so caught up in the fantasy that I actually had been speaking out all the parts like really loudly, right? So there in the back pew, like 10 feet away, are an entire row of my schoolmates. 8 girls, all the really pretty and popular ones, and one guy, Tim Craggs, sitting right in the middle. And they're all staring and gawking at the freak, right? So Tim, he calls me over. He's like, "Frank, come here." So I go over there, and then Tim makes a space next to him on the bench, and he pats it, and he says, "Come here, come sit next to me." So I go because Tim's cool, and I have to do what he says, right? So, but here's the problem, right? The kneelers are down, so there's like 2 inches of space for me to squeeze past this row of twittering girls. And oh yeah, I was a fat kid, right? So here I go. I'm fat and I'm sweaty and my ass is in these girls' face and I'm sure I stink, right? And I'm stepping on their fucking feet and it's horrible. It's a marathon of embarrassment. And I finally collapse next to Tim, right? And I look at Tim, I'm exhausted, and he looks at me and he smiles and he says, "Okay, you can go now." Oh God. I'm trapped, and I have to go all the way back down that aisle. And I stand up, and I pray to God. I say, "God, please, don't let them see me cry. I can bear this if you don't let them see me cry." Fast forward some more. I'm 19, and I'm at a house party in a basement. And who walks down the stairs but Tim Craggs, right? Now, normally, had I seen Tim, I might have been filled with like shame and rage, right? But at this time in my life, I had finally found something that got me out of my shell and really connected me to the world in a meaningful way. Ecstasy. Yeah. The drug, yeah, it works. I loved the stuff. I took it all the time. When I was on ecstasy, I felt like all the beauty in the world that had been hidden my entire life was suddenly everywhere, right? So when Tim comes down the stairs, right, I don't want to hit him, I want to hug him. So I go right up to Tim and I'm like, "Tim, hey, you remember that time at church?" And Tim does not remember what I'm talking about. But I don't care, you know? I go ahead and tell Tim my entire life story, right? I tell him about my childhood and how horrible I felt and what it was like being a cocksucker and what an outcast I was. And Tim is really shocked. He's like, "Frank, you know, I always thought you were pretty cool. You know, I was the one who was the outcast. Yeah, because of my father. You knew about my father and what he did to me. Everybody knew about my father, and everybody shunned me because of it." And I was like, "Tim, I don't know what you're talking about." So Tim tells me what his father did to him. His father would take him in the basement and tie him to the chair and lock him down there in the dark for hours or sometimes days. His father tortured him. I'd never heard anything so cruel or sad in my life. When Tim told me that, the shell around my heart just burst open. I always thought that I alone was the fish out of water, that my pain was so special and so unique. But I was so wrapped up in my own pain that I was blind to the truth, that everybody suffers, that everybody feels like a fish out of water. And finally, I was just like everybody else.